Today, we'll discuss a 2014 action sci-fi movie called Lucy. Sit back, relax and enjoy. A single cell floating in the water splits. It continues to divide rapidly into multiple cells. A prehistoric man drinks thirstily from a lake. Lucy, an ordinary foreign exchange student, wonders what we have done with the life that was given to us a billion years ago. She stands outside a hotel in Taiwan talking to her week-old boyfriend Richard. He asks her to deliver a briefcase up to the hotel room to Mr. Zhang. When Lucy asks him what is in the briefcase, Richard tells her not to get paranoid. Richard tells her he will be paid $1,000 to deliver the briefcase and offers to give her half. She says she is not interested and that she wants to leave. As Lucy turns to go, Richard handcuffs her wrist to the briefcase handle. She is very angry and demands that he remove it. As Mr. Zhang is the only person with the key, she has no choice. Richard gives her the money and she walks to the hotel lobby. Lucy informs the clerk at reception that she is there to meet Mr. Zhang. A parallel is drawn to a cheetah observing gazelles in the wild as it waits for the perfect time to attack its prey. When the clerk asks her name, Lucy nervously informs him that Richard sent her. Lucy looks through the window to see Richard smiling encouragingly. The clerk says that Mr. Zhang insists on knowing her name. In another flash to the wild, the cheetah purposefully approaches its prey. Mr. Zhang instructs the clerk to tell Lucy to stay exactly where she is. A group of thugs approach Lucy from the elevator. This scene is juxtaposed with footage of cheetahs stalking a gazelle. Richard is shot as he waits for Lucy outside. Lucy is terrified as she is forced to accompany them into the elevator. The cheetahs kill the gazelle and carry it away in their jaws. Lucy is dragged along the passage to Mr. Zhang's apartment. Zhang steps over dead bodies on his way to his office to meet Lucy. His hands are soaked with blood and he has blood spatters on his face. Zhang sits at his desk and makes a phone call to a man to translate for Lucy. She cries, saying she hasn't done anything wrong and has no knowledge of what is going on. Lucy explains that she does not know what is in the briefcase that Richard gave her to deliver to him. Zhang writes down the number 140 on a piece of paper and leaves the room as his thugs follow him. They arm themselves with guns and shields. The translator tells her the number is the code to open the briefcase. She opens the briefcase, describing the contents as 4 plastic pouches filled with blue crystals. Zhang returns and pierces one of the pouches with his knife. He inserts a straw into the powder. The thugs bring in a drugged man and force him to snort some of the blue crystals. The man convulses and then starts laughing maniacally. Zhang shoots him in the head. Lucy is then ordered by Zhang to do a job, which she refuses to do. His thug hits her in the face. Elsewhere, Professor Samuel Norman gives a lecture on his research of the brain's capacity. He discusses Darwin's theory of evolution and what might happen if humans could exceed the 10% brain capacity they use. Lucy wakes up in a hotel room with a bloody bandage on her stomach. Zhang's men enter the room, throw her some clothes and tell her to hurry up. They take her to Zhang. She asks what they did to her. A British man known as the Limey explains to Lucy that she and 3 other men had a new drug called CPH4 inserted into their stomachs and they will be used as drug mules. The men are given passports and air tickets so they can return home. The drug will be removed from their bodies when they arrive. The Limey warns them not to alert anyone. Simultaneously, Professor Samuel Norman continues his lecture on his research. He explains that if the environment is hostile, the cell will choose immortality and move elsewhere. However, if the habitat is favorable, they will choose to reproduce. A thug comes into the room. He puts his hand down the front of her blouse and makes lewd comments. After knocking her to the floor, he kicks her repeatedly. She is in chains and cannot escape. Lucy notices her stomach is bleeding. The beating from the thugs has caused a tear in the drug pouch, leaking the powder into her system. She begins to convulse and thrash across the room, then levitates to the wall and then the ceiling, until she falls back down. Back at the lecture, the professor explains if humans were able to utilize more than 40% of their brain capacity, they might be able to manipulate other humans and even matter. A student asks him what would happen if people could access 100%. He answers that he has no idea. We cut back to Lucy, who opens her eyes, which are now bright blue, and sits back on the chair. The drug has given her enhanced physical and mental capabilities. The thug returns and Lucy smiles at him as she spreads her legs, seducing him. He puts his keys and his gun on the table. As he leans over her, Lucy grabs his belt, flips him over and then pulls the table closer to take the gun. After she frees herself, she shoots the other thugs as they eat. Lucy notices that she has been shot in the shoulder and removes the bullet without feeling pain. She eats the food before leaving. After walking through the building, she sees 2 taxi drivers outside. She shoots one in the leg and tells the other driver to take her to hospital. Lucy realizes she has heightened senses, as she clearly hears people speaking outside the taxi. On arrival at the hospital, she is able to read the signs as easily as if they were in English. She walks into an operating room where doctors are busy with an operation. Lucy checks the patient's x-rays. She shoots the man, stating that they wouldn't have been able to save him as the tumor in his spine had spread too far. She forces the doctors at gunpoint to remove the bag from her stomach. Lucy uses the doctor's phone to call her mother. She says she is able to feel everything, the air, vibrations, the blood in her veins, the heat leaving her body, and is even able to access her deepest memories. She tells her mother that she loves her before hanging up. The doctor removes the pouch of drugs from Lucy's stomach. She tells him the bag contains CPH4. The doctor is surprised, telling her that this is something that pregnant women produce 6 weeks into their pregnancy as nutrients for the fetus. Lucy returns to the hotel to find Jang, who is getting a tattoo and a facial. She kills his guards and tells the tattoo artist to leave. She stabs 2 knives into an unsuspecting Jang's hands, pinning him to the chair. Lucy presses her thumbs to his forehead and taps into his thoughts. She recalls where the other 3 drug mules are traveling to, based on images of their passports and plane tickets. Professor Samuel Norman returns to his hotel in Paris. Lucy visits her roommate and friend, Caroline, to use her laptop. After reading Norman's 6,734-page research on the human brain in a matter of seconds, she contacts him to ask him to meet her. She appears on his TV screen and explains what she is experiencing now that she has reached up to 28% brain capacity. Lucy describes the changes in her mind and body and says he is correct in his theory, as she is now able to control other people and matter. She says it seems that all things that make her human are fading away. The less human she feels, the more knowledge she has. After she tells him that she will be dead in 24 hours, she asks what she should do. Norman simply replies that she should pass the knowledge on to others. Lucy says she will be at his door in 12 hours. She gives a prescription to Caroline, telling her that her liver and kidneys are failing. As she leaves for the airport, she says Caroline needs to make new lifestyle choices and she'll be okay. Walking through the airport, she sees a description of herself on the TV news as the killer of the patient she shot in the hospital. Lucy is able to immediately alter the hair and the color to avoid being recognized. She calls a French policeman, Captain Pierre Del Rio, to inform him of the other drug mules. An airport security dog approaches her and backs away as she looks into its eyes. As the mule arrives in Berlin, he is apprehended by the police, as are the others in Paris and Rome. After boarding the plane, Lucy continues her research on the brain. The flight attendant asks her to turn off her computer. Lucy asks for a glass of champagne and tells the woman to wipe her bleeding nose without even looking at her. Lucy toasts to knowledge. She has reached 40% brain capacity. She sees her tooth at the bottom of the glass and then she coughs 3 more teeth into her hand. Her skin starts to disintegrate, horrifying the passengers and flight attendants. Lucy runs to the bathroom, where her fingers begin to disintegrate. Her face starts to melt. She retrieves the rest of the CPH4 from her bag and frantically eats it. After the drug restores her back to normal, she passes out. Lucy wakes up in a hospital room, with her brain now functioning at 50% capacity. She sits up instantly and gets dressed. As she leaves, Del Rio and his men approach her. She waves her hands and the men fall asleep. Lucy tells him that she needs to speak to him alone. Del Rio tells her he has the other packages in safekeeping. She responds that they would be safer in her hands and walks away. One of Jang's henchmen, G, arrives at the hospital with more armed men to find the other mules. Del Rio looks apprehensively at Lucy as they sit in his police car listening to the police radio. Jang orders his men to find Lucy after being told that she has escaped with the drugs. Lucy drives Del Rio at high speed through the streets of Paris. Jang's men go to the hospital to remove the drug pouches from the mules. When Lucy and Del Rio arrive at the hospital, the thugs are shooting their way out to escape. G retrieves the pouches, stepping over the dead bodies on his way out to the passage. Lucy is standing there with Del Rio. G orders his men to kill her and to get the pouch. With her brain now functioning at 60%, she uses her mind power to create an invisible wall to prevent G from escaping with the briefcase full of drugs. The men's weapons levitate to the ceiling and Lucy approaches them using her powers of levitation on them as well. Lucy immobilizes G and takes the briefcase from him. She hands the briefcase to Del Rio and puts the last pouch she removes from the body of the mule into it. He says he is of no use to her now and she walks over to him and kisses him, telling him he reminds her she is human. Jang sees them leave and orders his men to follow them. Lucy and Del Rio meet Professor Norman and his colleagues at the university and he discusses her superhuman abilities with them. One of the professors asks Lucy to give them an example of her abilities. She grabs his shoulder and tells him exactly how his daughter died, even though Lucy has never met the doctor before. G updates Jang about Lucy and Jang says he'll kill her himself. Jang and his men arrive at the university. A professor asks Lucy how she managed to secure all her information on a cellular level. She shows them, using her hand, how cells change to deform and reform. Jang's men infiltrate the building to find her and start shooting. Lucy gives the CPH4 to the professors to synthesize it into liquid form. She tells Professor Norman that when she is at full brain capacity she will build him a computer so he can access all the knowledge she has. Professor Norman says all of this might only bring humanity chaos and instability. Lucy tells him that ignorance brings chaos, not knowledge. Del Rio and the police open fire on Zhang's man. As her brain function increases to 70%, her hands change into a black runny substance that spreads, attaching itself to the computers in the room. Professor Norman explains to his colleagues that Lucy is looking for energy and matter. The goo spreads rapidly over everything in the room. As her brain function increases to 80%, she manipulates matter, erasing everything in the room. The professors stand in a white space. Lucy creates a new generation computer as they watch in amazement. Her brain capacity has increased to 90%. Jean fires a rocket launcher at the door as Zhang's men are shot by the police. The explosion blows Lucy to New York. She discovers that by moving her hands she can travel back in time. Lucy travels from early 20th century New York to colonial times and then all the way back to prehistoric times. She meets the prehistoric man from the opening scene. They touch fingers, sending Lucy through space and time, giving her unlimited and infinite power. Zhang stands behind her with his gun aimed at her head. As her brain reaches 100% capacity, she reverts back to a single cell. Zhang fires his gun repeatedly at the emptied chair and demands to know where Lucy is. Del Rio arrives and kills Zhang. The black goo in the room hands a flash drive to Norman to assist him to complete his research. Del Rio asks where Lucy is. A message appears on his phone saying, "I am everywhere." Lucy's voice is then heard stating life was given to us a billion years ago. Now you know what to do with it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thanks and see you again soon.